All right, drum roll, please. Ready? Three, two, one. Drum roll, please. He's still joining. Drum roll, please. Welcome, Delaney. What's up, man? Just wanted you to see the people here. We got some people in our office, in person here, and on Zoom. We got some students back at school. Been hyping up this message for a few weeks now. We've jumped onto your YouTube channel, and I know our students and leaders are ready to learn. So, guys, for those of you that don't know who Delaney is a would you say flow state coach?
Yeah, flow state, high performance, cognitive performance, whatever you want to call it.
Great. So all about just focus and being intentional. So this is going to be a great message that Delaney is going to deliver here for you guys. I had a chance to hear Delaney speak at one of our retreats with my coaching group with Mike Chu and Evolve, and I really learned a lot about myself, different strategies to focus, be more intentional. And I think you also gave a message to Sebastian and his team, and heard a lot of really great things about it. So really fired up for you to give this message, and I'll let you go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much, Delaney. We appreciate you for being here.
Perfect, bro. I appreciate that introduction. I assumed I was going to have to get everyone up and moving to get the hype going, but I think you already brought the hype. So it feels like we're ready to dive in. How you guys doing down there? You guys are in Lincoln Park, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I love it. So I'm actually from Lamont, Illinois. I grew up in the Chicago area, went to University of Illinois for my undergrad, and I lived in Lincoln Park for my first 2 years out of college. So
Woo, let's go.
I love it.
That's fun.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're definitely going to dive into some really fun stuff. I love working with you guys. I've definitely given talks to, like you mentioned, I gave a talk at a retreat that a lot of people from Cutco were a part of. And it's just really cool. I'll share my story, but I've been really passionate about cognitive performance, preventing burnout, how do you balance your personal life and your passions and also thrive in your career and not get beaten down by, having a really significant workload. And sales was never really my thing in the corporate space. So I never really saw the blending of these two spaces, but it's super obvious. I just really wasn't plugged into the sales world, and getting plugged in with these guys showed me how not necessarily just how needed it is, but how valuable really learning how to use the power of our mind and really honing and doubling down on our practices so that we can be our best self, not just to do well in business, but really to have a thriving life in every area of our life, in our relationships, in our relationship with ourselves, our mental and emotional well-being, just general happiness. That's truly what I'm all about. So really excited to dive in with you guys today. Let me just tell you a little bit about my background before we dive in. So like I mentioned, I studied at the University of Illinois. I double majored in IT and marketing. I was a big nerd. And I went out from college. I started working in the corporate space in Schaumburg. I was working as a product manager for this really big mobile app for this really big healthcare company. And I was really driven, like you guys. I was really passionate, really committed to my career, and I was climbing the corporate ladder, doing really well. I didn't have the best self-care practices, and I had a pretty challenging upbringing. So I was really into partying. Yes, I was successful, but I was also binge drinking on the weekends, getting myself into a lot of trouble, and working really hard. And I was burning the candle at both ends. And I didn't really realize it at the time, but it led to a really significant burnout that had me ultimately decide I was going to leave the corporate space because I literally was not functioning. My personal life really didn't have any fulfillment. My practices were poor. My mental health was really poor, chronically anxious, basically depressed. And was just really numbing myself out with drugs and alcohol to try to cope with this life that I'd created for myself. So that led me to being really curious about understanding the mind, mental health. But I've always been someone that's driven, and I wanted to create even my own career it took a while for me to decide that this was going to be my career path, but I was really fascinated with this concept of how do you seek success without sacrificing yourself? Because, there's this domain of, you have the David Goggins who are like grind, get after it. which leads to burnout. And then you have like the self-love, let's meditate all day type of people who are like loving themselves and enjoying their life. But also for me, there was this blend. And I picked up this book one day called, man, I'm going to forget what the first book is called. But anyways, it's written by Stephen Kotler on flow state. And I read this book on flow state, and it was this aha moment. It was like, oh, flow state is like the way that you blend success and taking care of yourself and well-being. And if you actually just aim for flow, which is a state of being that we'll speak to in a minute, if you can organize your life around flow, you're not only going to experience way higher levels of success, but you're also going to experience a way higher quality of life. That's led me down a path to spending years and years working under different mentors and different organizations, building several six-figure businesses from the ground up in the personal development space, all centered around how do we optimize ourselves as human beings. So that's my story. And let's dive in. So I have some slides to share, but I'd love to just interact with you guys a little bit. What do you guys feel like is your biggest opportunity or pain point that you're experiencing as, I don't know if you guys call yourself sales reps or just in the space that you're in? What are the biggest challenges or opportunities that you guys have as it comes to your performance?
We're unmuted here, so anyone can jump in.
I think the biggest challenge is like taking care of, like you mentioned, your mental health, either like stress, anxiety, or stuff like that. I feel like that's the biggest challenge, at least for me.
Okay, cool. Say more about that. So stress, mental health, how does it manifest? How does it affect your work? Where does it come? Where do you see it come up the most?
Yeah, I feel like, well, let's say after the job, right, it manifests itself as like overthinking, then like my body feels heavy, or like I'm just tired out of nowhere. I feel like it manifests itself into like my body, my mental health, and like it's just externally, like maybe waking up and not want to wake up, not like that, but like stay in bed or stuff like that, you know. So I feel like it manifests itself as like overthinking and like your brain fog and gibberish in the brain.
Got it. And Darius, you want to add something?
I was going to also say like it manifesting to eventually it'll start to overwhelm you. Yeah, because I know I get that a lot.
Yeah. And then what happens, right? Because that sucks. It doesn't feel good. But how does that, and then what does that do for your, like, how does that affect when you're pitching, when you're selling? Do you notice it yourself showing up differently when you feel that way?
Yeah, I get like really antsy to like get to the last page, like to get to the close. And yeah, I don't like that. Or like, yeah, I get like tired. I start yawning. Yeah.
Don't want to be yawning when you're selling. Cool. Anyone else want to share quickly, and then we'll keep moving? Cool. Got some hands up in the room.
Yeah, so sometimes going into autopilot on demos is something that negatively affects me. I've done a lot of demos, and sometimes I find myself saying the words and not actually putting the emotion into it, and that definitely affects closing percentage in that regard.
Yeah, they're not engaging with you as deeply. Cool. One more.
Yeah, I was gonna say same thing what you have with your corporate life. I go like 4 months, like I'm awesome, like I'm doing the habits, the healthy habits that I need to do. I'm seeing the results in my sales, but I get tired of it. So like I say, like let me take this weekend for myself, and then the momentum breaks down. Now I have to build back, and it's just constant, like this cycle that repeats itself.
I've been there. Cool. So that all resonates. That's definitely more or less what I was expecting to hear from you guys. I know not too many curveballs there. I am going to share. Oh, can you turn on screen sharing? Jacob?
That was a thumbs up.
Thanks, bro.
Gotcha.
There we go. All right. I think it's this. Can y'all see?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let me get this out of here and blow this up a little bit. So I'm not going to speak to the slides too much, but we'll use them here. All right. I still want to be able to see you guys though. There you go. All right, cool. So it's always cool because you can frame up flow state to solve pretty much any problem. But in sales, it's a phenomenal tool to get out of your head and crush your sales, right? We want to feel better in our body. We also want to crush it in our role. All right, so flow state can be described because right, you hear about flow. What is flow? You find flow when you're like windsurfing or you're on the top of a mountain. Flow, from my perspective, is when you're dialed in, focused, and deeply present, right? You're not distracted, you're not elsewhere, you're just here. You're dialed in, you're focused, you're very productive. We're going to talk about some studies really briefly on the impact that being able to channel flow state more consistently has in the workplace, but also makes you feel more confident and creativity and creatively heightened. And again, we'll speak to a little bit in the next couple slides on how the brain is affected when you're in flow. We're not going to get too sciencey, but just understanding that it makes sense, right? When you're focused, when you're present, when you're high energy, you feel confident, you feel good in your body. The people you're selling to or interacting with are feeling that from you, and you're going to be more creative. You feel, you have a bit more spark inside of yourself. And you also have an elevated sense of ease and well-being, right? You can probably remember some time where you were in a flow state. I'm sure everyone has at least one moment. Maybe it was out doing nature or like football or whatever, but there's also probably a time when you're at work and like 4 hours of work went by, like studying or something. You're like, oh my God, that went by so fast. I was just so enthralled in what I was doing, but you also weren't stressed. Like it was like time went by and you were just so immersed in what you're doing. All right, so here's some cool data that I think is just really, really fascinating, and I love to use it as a backbone to get people kind of intrigued or curious about what's going on here with flow state. So these are all like very legitimate studies that have been done on flow and the impact of flow in the workspace. My favorite one is all the way on the left here. So McKinsey is the biggest consulting firm in at least the country. I don't know, maybe the world as well. And they did a 10-year study with their executives. So if you think about being an executive at a massive consulting firm, your life is stressful, you're solving really complex business problems, but those who were trained in flow state were 500% more productive. And that number literally sounds ridiculous, because what that number means is that the executives who learned how to channel flow state and structure their life and their work for flow got more done in a single day than it took their peers a week to do. Or basically in a week, they got done what their peers can do in a month, which is pretty profound and really, really cool when you realize that these are basically, once we get to the bottom of what flow is, it's nothing but different daily practices, more or less, or ways to structure your life and your work so that you're more dialed in, focused, and present. We also see very similar data on levels of heightened creativity, the speed in which it takes to acquire new skills. I think that's a fascinating one. So when you get yourself in a flow state to learn, you're adopting and learning, and actually like that stuff is sticking almost 500% greater than if you're not, and also creative problem solving. So again, in the space of sales, these are all really, really useful things to have in your tool belt. All right, how flow works. So we're not going to get, again, crazy sciencey. I'm all about breaking it down and making things as easy to understand as possible. But my favorite thing about all this is that it's not like woo-woo ethereal. It's very, very basic and grounded in science. So the way, if you've ever been in a hospital and you've seen maybe someone in a hospital bed, you see the chart on the wall, they're tracking all their vitals. Obviously, we have a heartbeat that is either slow or fast. Just like our heart is an organ, our brain is an organ, and our brain has its own beat, but it's called our brain wave, right? So if you were to measure someone's brain function, it would be beating just like a heart on a wave, on a frequency at a certain speed. So in 24 hours, all of us here, our brain is doing this either fast or slow, right? And it's just like you would think, right? It's intuitive. If you're these lower states, that's when you're sleeping. When you're in your deepest sleep states, your brain is going really, really slow. Most people in the workplace who don't know much about flow state or just live in this world where we're on our phones and there's traffic and life is crazy and Instagram, we're often in beta brainwave state. So that means our brain is kind of frantic, we're half present, we're maybe a little bit anxious, we're distracted, we're over caffeinated, whatever it might be. Most people spend most of their waking time in beta. When we're sleeping, we might be in delta or theta. But the sweet spot flow state can be distilled down. It's not this, flow state is not this ethereal thing. It's literally just getting your brain into the alpha brainwave state. And you don't even need to know about, like, we're not even measuring these things. It's literally just this idea of, can I just slow my brain down? Like, it can be conceived of as that simple. Usually I'm feeling frantic. Can I slow my brain down just a little bit? Not sleepy, but can I get present? Can I get grounded? A lot of the things that I'm going to share today with you guys in terms of practices are going to be things like that are super normal, right? Meditation, yoga, just breathing practices, taking intermittent breaks from our work. These things that people say you should do, we don't really understand why we should do them and the impact that it has on us. But when we realize that flow state and all those amazing benefits we just spoke about are nothing more than just getting just calming our mental state down just a little bit and getting a new baseline that we operate from that's just a little bit more chill, has all those amazing benefits. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. All right, so here's the last sciencey part, and then we're gonna get tactical. So this, I think, is also super fascinating. The brain has 6 neurotransmitters. Dopamine, and again, you don't have to remember these things. Dopamine, norepinephrine, anandamide, endorphins, serotonin, and oxytocin. So what's so dope is that anything you guys love in life, it might be going to see an awesome movie, having a couple of drinks with your friends, going on a date, going on a roller coaster, going to an awesome music festival, taking some mushrooms, like whatever you're doing and it feels good and it's fun. It's because of a combination of these things, and even wholesome things too, right? Like hanging out with your family, Christmas morning, like all of these things that we enjoy are actually just a combination of these buckets opening in our brain. And I think that's really fascinating because, like, you know, we don't want to take the magic out of life, but when you realize that being a human and being happy and being joyful is also not this ethereal thing, it's like, can I create systems in my life that cause these buckets to open in my brain and make me feel this way, right? So there's just one word descriptions. Dopamine is probably the most important. You guys have probably heard about dopamine a little bit, but dopamine is responsible for drive. So we're going to learn how do you trigger more dopamine in your day-to-day, especially in your mornings, in your daily practices, so that you're feeling into this energy of drive. Norepinephrine is the same thing as adrenaline, which is, again, this is like hyperactivity, but not necessarily overly stressed, but just like you're engaged, you're ready to take on the day. I'm not going to speak into the rest of these, but one thing that's really fascinating is that there's no substance on the planet that triggers all 6 of these, but a cycle of flow and learning how to tap into flow state will throughout the full cycle of like getting into it and then how you feel after it does trigger all 6, which I think is very, very fascinating. And it can be, flow itself can be an addictive thing, but it can also be a thing that, you know, serves your life rather than ruins your life. All right, this is also super, super, super important. I learned this lesson the hard way, that flow is I guess it's technically a renewable resource, but it's not a limitless resource, because you have these buckets in your brain that make you feel good and make you really productive and feel like you're a Superman if you tap into them. They have to be reproduced by your brain. So you cannot be in flow state all the time. It's more about how do you protect your time and energy and be really, really on when you're on and get into flow and crush it. And then also honor your rest and recovery and not try to be a hero by working 22-hour days. You know, even people like David Goggins, who are so hyped about how they just like never stop. That dude was in bed rest for like 6 months because his body basically just stopped working. So we all have a breaking point. And from my perspective, I would much rather be really, really on for just like a very normal workday, have awesome recovery, but then be able to repeat and repeat and repeat that rather than burning myself out. So, yeah, and the reason I share that here on this slide, right? There's 4 stages to flow. And another great takeaway is the first stage is struggle. So when you sit down at your desk or you're getting ready to make phone calls and it's uncomfortable and you don't want to do it and you want to check your phone and you want to go get a snack or a coffee, that's normal and it's literally part of the process. But the reason people don't find flow is that they allow themselves to fall into the story of, oh, okay, I should listen to that voice and I should go check my phone. I should go get a coffee. I should go get a snack. If you can be with that feeling of discomfort, which is cortisol being released in your body and norepinephrine, your body being like, oh, I don't want to do this. I know this is going to suck. If you can just be with that feeling for no more than 5 minutes, it will subside. And then your brain will release nitric oxide and you'll get into flow state and you will start having all those amazing benefits. We don't need to speak to the science more than that, but essentially just if you could remember anything, it's like, and when we'll talk about different practices, one of these practices being time blocking, right? Like there's some really cool apps. There's an app called Flora, Flora, which whenever I'm going to do a work sprint, I like to put this app on, and it's not just like a 45-minute work timer, right? I'm gonna be really focused, really dialed in for 45 minutes. And I'm not going to, and the reason I like this app is that it doesn't allow you to go into your phone, and like, it basically like keeps you just on this timer. So I'm not tempted to pick up my phone, but finding ways to just keep yourself present, know that, okay, if I can get through this discomfort phase, that's how I get into flow. And I'm going to have really, really productive sessions. And of course, recovery, we'll talk about recovery, but again, being really productive and dialed in is it's expensive for the brain. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do we use our time outside of work to make sure we're honoring our brain, our rest, and our recovery. All right, what's needed for flow? We're going to go through this pretty quickly because I'd rather give you guys a bunch of tips. But here's some things that are basically the building blocks for flow. Again, if you want to write this guy's name down, he's got a few great books on flow. His name is Stephen Kotler, Kotler. I think The Art of Impossible is one of his most recent books that goes deep on this stuff. And I took this from him. So in their research and understanding and unpacking what's needed for flow, there are 5 components: intrinsic drive, clarity of goals and immediate feedback, deep focus, balance between skills and challenge, and the feeling of control. So we're going to talk tactically about how to leverage some of these things, but I'd like to speak to why they're important real quick. So flow is mostly rooted in dopamine, right? This dopamine is the chemical for drive. It makes us take action. We don't get dopamine from after eating ice cream. We get dopamine because we have a thought that's like, yo, ice cream would be really good, and it motivates us. The dopamine is experienced in the excitement of the thing. So when you set a goal of, I'm going to close, 20K in sales this month, I don't know if that's a high or low goal for you guys. I'm just throwing out random numbers, but the excitement about that goal is what creates dopamine. What creates, when you feel excited in your body viscerally, that's what triggers dopamine. So it's really important to have intrinsic drive and figure out, okay, if I'm going to sell knives, I better understand my why. I better understand why I care about selling knives. I have to manufacture some sort of reason that is emotional and embedded in me deeply on why I'm here. Why is this important to me? What's my life going to look like in 10 years if I stay committed? What kind of life can I provide for my family? Like really, really extrapolating it out and making it emotional and making it big and meaningful. Because the more meaningful, the more big, the more you feel like you're deeply in it, the more innate dopamine, innate motivation, innate drive you're going to tap into. All right, clarity of goals and immediate feedback. So that just means like you're really, really, really clear on what's going to happen. And we'll speak a little bit to this in that, like the tactical tools part, but I'll also speak into it now, which is the biggest thing that takes away from flow state. One of the biggest ones is anxiety, fear, and uncertainty and doubt, which basically all come from unclear goals or an unclear action plan, right? So if you were like, hey, drive to Nebraska without a phone right now, you'd be like, I can't fucking drive to Nebraska from wherever I am right now. But if you had Google Maps, which had all 152 directions in the backside of it, and you only had to focus on your next turn, you'd be chilling and you'd be like, let me just throw on some Spotify and let's crank it. Like, I'm not worried at all. That analogy can and should be applied to your work, right? So whatever your big goal is, when you truly break it down to, you guys are selling knives, and this is very fundamental ground level self-development stuff, but being completely clear that, okay, if this is my number, how do I break that down to literally just the number of appointments I need to have today? And just always returning yourself to what do I need to do today, trusting and knowing that all the things on the back end, the bigger vision, the bigger plan, the other 99% of my plan is taken care of, will very much allow you to get into flow state. Deep focus, balance of skills and challenge. Obviously, if something's too hard, you're just going to feel overwhelmed. If it's too, Jacob, we got some questions.
Yeah, I got a question here from. What were the emotions that you used to avoid so this doesn't happen?
Anxiety. So not necessarily to avoid, because then it's like, oh, I'm feeling this way, that's a bad thing. More just like when we feel the emotions, you know, we're going to learn how to structure to minimize those. So anxiety, fear, doubt, and overwhelm, I suppose. That's kind of anxiety, maybe more specific anxiety. And this is like a deeper thing that I'm kind of nerdy about, and I love talking about emotions and mindset. You know, I wouldn't say any of those are bad. Like if I woke up and felt anxious, I wouldn't say this is bad, because then if I think it's bad, I'm trying to avoid it. I'm like trying to distance myself from it. Then I'm probably like numbing it, which is even worse. I would probably just get really curious, right? So if I felt overwhelmed, I would actually go as deep into that overwhelm as possible to understand it. I would like journal on it. I would meditate on it. I'd be like, why do I feel overwhelmed? But then eventually understand it and then create a plan so that I'm feeling less to address it, right? So if my underlying fear is, there's no way I'm going to hit trying to come up with a good example here. You know, if I'm overwhelmed because I need to close another 6K in deals, well, that's not going to serve me at all. So let me come up with a strategy to not feel overwhelmed. Well, let me just make a plan for the rest of the day and for the next couple of days and take it one day at a time, right? So it's like acknowledge the emotion, set a new plan to address it, move forward. Evan, you got a question?
Yeah, it's probably a weird one, but like today, just phoning right before this talk, I recognize now that I was in flow state. I had trouble making that first call, but after I did, I just kept going and going. Do you ever like recognize and say to yourself that you are in flow state? Or is it kind of just a feeling that you recognize maybe afterhand?
No, you for sure can. And like you'll get more, like I think because not a lot of people talk about flow, it feels like this like ethereal, like altered state, which it really is an altered state. But no, it's just basically normal. You can basically decide it's your new operating normal, and you totally know when you're in it, right? You're like, you can call it flow, but you can also just call it the absence of distraction. So it's like, or the synonym is just I'm being really productive, right? Like they're kind of one and the same, and you can be in a crazy flow state. But like for me, now that I understand it, I just get pissed. Like I just get super pissed off when I have to have meetings because it takes me out of that state. I'm just like triggered at everybody because I know how good it feels to be in that state, and it's like I really protect that. But yeah, you can definitely be in it and acknowledge it at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know we got some questions. I'd love to just rip through the rest of the content and then we'll take questions. All right, designing for flow. This could be like a 4-hour presentation, so I'm really distilling it down here for you guys to what I picked as the 3 most important things. So one is vision, and I spoke to this a little bit, but again, dopamine, which is the predecessor for putting you in a flow state, comes from being really intrinsically excited about whatever you got to do. So if you're selling knives, and if that feels mundane, you know, I'm not saying that it does, but I just know in the nature of this stuff, like when you're grinding, you can forget your why. And this is, again, like sales jargon 101, but it's very real and it's very connected to flow state. Really, really, really root yourself in your why as like even a daily ritual, a daily practice. Like before you start your day, maybe have some sort of visualization practice that you do, or maybe journaling. Like I love to journal. I'm going to talk about that as one of the practices that keeps you in flow, but I love to every morning pick a random timeline, like, and I'll just ask myself at the top of the paper, what do I want my life to look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 3 months? Like I'll pick a different timeline when I'm 91, and I'll just journal on that. And it gets you really excited in the possibility, which is literally your brain releasing dopamine, which is a great way to then use that brain fuel to take action. So I would really, really invite you guys to, if you haven't done this lately, really, really reconnect to the reason that you're doing this and doing anything in life. And it doesn't have to be just about work, but how does work interrelate with my relationships? if I really just lean in and get after it this month, or pursue my goals aggressively to the degree I need to, how is that going to set me up? How's that going to set up my wife or my husband and my son in the future? And just like getting really excited about how all of that cross intermingles, and you'll be fascinated with how much extra juice that gives you. And also, it's not necessarily, I guess it kind of counts as step one, a lot of clarity on vision too, right? So especially being in sales, maybe you guys already have these things, but just like really, really, really clear numbers on like, what do you want to be doing, right? And not just like in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, like get really excited, but get really, really specific. You have to be super specific on your goals. And I would expand this beyond, you should do that for every area of your life. Be super specific for the type of partner you want to have. Not that you wouldn't date anyone else, but just like ask yourself, what would I love to experience in each area of my life? And when you're so detailed, you can see it becoming way more real. All right, clear plan. Again, I don't need to drain this because I spoke to it previously, but just really breaking it down. Like I think I personally am at my most successful or my most productive and efficient and effective when every Sunday I sit down and can like just say, this is what a successful week would look like. If I can just check these check boxes, I'm on track to a 1 month milestone, which is basically on track to a 6 month milestone, which is on track to my 1 year and 5 year milestone, right? I've done that work to break it down. So I only have to think about the upcoming week or the upcoming month, and then eventually the upcoming day. But the more that is what prevents those emotions I talked about, which is anxiety, overwhelm, fear, and doubt. You know, if I was like, I want to be the next Joe Rogan, that would make, I would maybe get excited for 2 minutes and I'd probably get extremely overwhelmed because I'm like, how the fuck am I going to do that? But if I've created a clear plan that breaks that down into like, okay, well, I just got to put out amazing content. So I should be networking and I should figure out how to get really good podcast equipment, right? That's what I got to do this week or this month. Way more effective. And that is just a really simple foundational way to get into flow, right? So if you want to, I want to increase my sales closing rate by 10%, and I want to close 20 deals this month. Again, I have no idea if those are good or bad numbers, but once you have that plan, or maybe it's like over a year, I want to double my revenue from last year. Cool. Let me break that down. Where would I need to be 6 months from now to be on track for that? 3 months, 1 month from now. Yeah, I have a good amount of clients that I work with who are in the space of sales, and it's fascinating how grounded and simple it is because they feel like they're stuck and failing, but it's really like, okay, cool. What are you going to commit to this week so you can work on your closing rate? Like, I'm not going to hang up on the phone with you so you tell me like what 3 people can you role play with, or like what fucking manual do you need to go study on your product so that you're more confident in your products. So clear plan. I think having a ritual where you're going into, before the week starts, before the day starts, before the month starts, you have a clear plan for what success looks like. All right, this is the juice. How am I doing on time? Am I over?
We can do 4 minutes, 5 to 7 more minutes.
5 to 7, okay, cool. All right, so I'm just gonna list off, I'm going to go through like 5 to 10 tools that really keep you in an alpha state. So we talked about the brainwave states. I'm going to share with you some of the tools that I've found most effective and useful for staying in that state or creating the most likelihood for that throughout my workday, right? I'm not even going to start with the daily practices. I'm going to start with more of like just the outer banks, which is morning and evening routines are super critical. You have the 80%, you have the 20%, right? 80% of your results come from 20% of your inputs. The best thing you can do for yourself is, one, get your circadian rhythm locked in. That's just like consistent sleep and wake times, and having a really good evening routine hygiene. Super simple stuff, but insane how impactful it is on your brain. If you're not already doing so, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, and have an evening routine where you're away from technology for at least an hour before you go to sleep. That would be like my number one tip. If you're not doing it, definitely start doing it. It will make massive impacts in your clarity, your mental performance, your emotional state. Sleep and I'll hit on sleep and recovery, but truly quality sleep is gonna have a 10 times return of anything else I talk about. So if you take away anything about like high performance and flow states, like get really good sleep, because anything else is just like drops in a bucket compared to literally letting your brain recover well. And the reason I say without technology, right? Technology keeps us in a beta brainwave state. So it hyperacts our brain. You know, you're watching some action movie, your brain can't differentiate that from real life because our brains are like designed for monkeys, right? So like we can't really tell the difference, and we get hyperactivated, and then we're trying to go to sleep and it's all fucked up and we say we can't sleep. And get in bed an hour before you want to fall asleep with a book and a journal, you will be knocked out in 10 minutes. So that's definitely one thing. I'll speak to a few different practices that I really like, but again, a solid morning routine is super important because before the chaos of the day starts, we want to start priming those buckets to release the neurochemicals that make us feel confident, creative, and productive, right? So that can look like any number of things. To me, it usually looks like stacking a few things that work for me. There is no perfect morning routine. There's only what works for you. You have to, one, enjoy it, and it has to be something you can see yourself doing for the long term. If it's neither of those things, you're just going to burn out on it and resent it probably. And less is more, right? 10 minutes of yoga every day is way better than like trying to go to yoga class, hating it, and not going back. So I guess I'll close that statement with just committing to at least an hour where you're just doing things for you that optimize your state before you go into the world. And that looks like probably not having your phone with you. So now some of those things that I think are really, really not just great, but like pivotal and critical is movement, intentional movement every day. We focus so much on mindset. If you literally look at your human body, your head is like maybe 12% of your total mass, right? The other thing is it's 88%. And we live in these boxes all day long that are lit with artificial light, and we don't get outside, and we sit like in this weird L-shaped position, and we wonder why it's hard to focus, and we all are anxious and depressed. And when we feel tense, like it doesn't have to be, so we have a nervous system, we get into this fight or flight state, right? When we experience stress, our body's designed for, like, stress is something that's maybe going to kill us, right? We're not designed to take phone calls. But when you're calling phones all day and you have quotas and you have goals, your body takes on stress and it takes on stress. Your muscles get tight. When your muscles get tight, cortisol is released and your body is stressed, and your mind is not going to get unstressed until you can clear your actual body of that stress. How do you do that? Stretching and yoga, I think, is one of the best ways. You don't have to go to an hour-long yoga class, but if you can commit to like 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the mid-afternoon, and 10 minutes in the late afternoon, early evening, you'll be mind blown by how much better you feel, like basically guaranteed. Personally, I do hot yoga at 6 a.m. I've been exploring doing it again at like 5 p.m. and then going to the gym, which I'm not recommending you do that. I'm just testing this out to see how it goes. But personally, for my body, I love it. I love the mental clarity I get because you truly do have a mind-body connection. And when you really take care of your body, it frees up your mind so much. From there, and of course, like movement with that, any movement, especially in the morning, is going to release a lot of those awesome neurochemicals, right? So running, lifting weights. I personally like to do that stuff in the afternoon, but getting any movement in at any time of the day is going to just like release those buckets of awesome neurochemicals. So you really can't get enough movement. But I will add to that. Also, if you want to like stack these things in the most efficient ways, getting outside for a morning walk is one of the best things you can do for your brain and your mental state. So I don't know if you guys follow Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist that has a fantastic podcast. But looking at the science, there's like literally nothing better you can do for even for the upcoming night's sleep, your cognitive performance than getting out in sun, because sun sets like literally the way our bodies are designed is like when you're out in sunlight, if you were like a human 200 years ago, that would indicate it's time for your body to wake up and really turn on all of its organs for a day. Now we're not even like, because we live in these boxes, we don't do that. But so we're actually not, our body's not getting those cues from nature or the world, the sun, whatever you want to call it, to actually turn on and fully operate. So getting outside, getting some movement and sunlight is really helpful. So those are the things you can all combine. But I would say one of the other things, especially for during the day, is breathing and breath quality. So most people, once they reach probably 5 years old, they stop breathing correctly. I would imagine almost no one here breathes properly throughout the day. Especially once we get into fight or flight, we get anxious, we have coffee, we're on our phone, we're breathing shallow through our mouth. That actually perpetuates more fight or flight, more tension, and more stress. What we want to be practicing is deep nasal diaphragmatic breathing. Yeah. So if you put your hand on your lower belly and don't use your mouth, use just your nose, try to breathe in and then push your hand out. So I'm not really positioned in a way that you can see this, but so like if you're breathing in, you want to try to like see your lower belly pushing out. And this is not something you're going to get on the first try or whatever, and it probably sounds ridiculous, like what is this dude doing? But truly, when you learn how to take deep, slow breaths using your diaphragm, that is the fastest way that you can calm your emotional state down. So you have your sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, tense and anxious. You have your parasympathetic nervous system, which is chill, calm, present, flow state. And truly, like if you start so you guys can write this down, box breathing, BOX. And if you look up box breathing on YouTube, you can find these. I like to do like a 10-minute or 20-minute box breathing YouTube thing, where it's literally just like dings on a metronome, where you're doing 5-second inhales, 5-second holds, 5-second exhales, and 5-second holds for 10 minutes. And you can do it while you wash the dishes. You can do it while you go for a walk. I do it while I go for a walk. You can do it while you're working, but it's a great way to retrain yourself to breathe deeply. And it might feel awkward. I would encourage you to stick with it for a couple weeks, because it takes time for your brain to adapt. But like personally, I listened to this YouTube thing for like a month, and now I genuinely breathe differently, like unconsciously. And it's super cool because whenever I'm stressed, like my body now actually understands how to calm itself. All right. I know I'm out of my minutes, so I'm going to go really quickly here. Visualization is awesome. When you visualize the things that you want to not only experience in terms of your goals, but also the emotional states you want to feel, your brain is actually creating new neural pathways. So getting anxious while presenting is a habit, right? It's like a pattern that we have. When you visualize yourself being extremely confident, your brain is actually creating new pathways, like basically everything we do is a groove, right? If some of us have deep grooves in our brain that make us open the refrigerator door when we get home from work, or pet our dog or whatever. You create new, deeper grooves by practice, but also visualization, which is super cool. So again, you don't have to sit there and meditate on a rock for hours, but you can spend 10 minutes in the morning, like seeing in your mind how you want your day to look. And if you do that every day, it's wild how much that can transform your life, especially when you connect to the emotions that you want to feel. So if you're like, okay, I want to feel confident today. Well, what does confidence feel like? What does confidence feel like in my body? Literally no one can feel something until they actually learn how to feel it, right? We get told you'll be happy when you make $1 million. Not if you never teach yourself how to feel happy in your body. You can actually feel happy today if you just start practicing what it feels like to feel happy. Emotions are just grooves in your brain that you can essentially practice. All right, anything else? So last thing, so I spoke about time blocking. Again, that essentially looks like be very present and work for 45 minutes, take 10 minutes off. If you structure your day like that, you're not going to burn out. You're not going to have those afternoon slumps, especially, but don't get on your phone for those 10 minutes. Like throw your phone in a drawer, go for a walk outside, do some stretching, do some breathing, do some meditation, talk to a coworker, do something that recharges you. Cold and heat exposure, sauna and ice baths are great. Again, they just like really, really cultivate awesome neurochemical things that happen in your body. You can look more into that on your own time. And the last thing that I'll harp on, because it's changed my life, is consider getting a smart device that tracks your biometrics. So I use this thing called an Oura Ring. You may or may not have heard of it. I didn't think I was going to like that much, and it changed my life, honestly. It tracks your sleep data in a really effective way to help you understand your patterns, right? So I truly believe that sleep is by far the most important thing. If you can unlock really, really high quality sleep, everything else will unfold for you. And once you start to understand different metrics like heart rate variability, again, that's something you can look into. But if you start optimizing those things, it's nice when you can actually see them quantified rather than, okay, I feel okay, I got 10 hours of sleep. But when you can actually see the different, like how long did you spend in each of those sleep states? And then you can understand how your dinner or your evening patterns and habits affected that. It's way easier to optimize and pretty much optimize for your daily energy. How much energy am I going to wake up with tomorrow? So that's all I've got. I know I went a little over time, so I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit longer. And Jacob, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Let's give Delaney a round of applause. Thank you, Delaney.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
That was incredible.
Yeah.
So Delaney, where can we follow you, stay up to date with you, get some more info on this? Because you stirred a lot of conversation and thoughts for everybody here. How can we stay connected?
Yeah, for sure, bro. So I on the last slide here, I got my Instagram handle. I'm kind of embarrassed that you guys found my YouTube because I think I've got like 3 videos on there. I don't know if any of them are new. So definitely go to my Instagram instead. I try to put something up there daily. Yeah, and you guys can like shoot me a message. Darius, you got a question?
So what was number 2? So I have vision, and number 3 is keep yourself in the alpha state, and number 2, it was something about planning.
Yeah, clear plan. Having a clear plan. So that's just like pretty much the how. How am I going to achieve the goals that I've set for my year, my month, my day, my week?
Cool. Great.
And then
Go first, Darius, go.
Okay, so you told C9 that it was minimize anxiety, the emotions that you want to minimize.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, if you're doing these things consistently, you will minimize anxiety, stress. Those are the same thing. Fear, doubt, and overwhelm.
Thank you.
I think the big question with that was like, why do those feelings come up? And I mean, I wrote down, Delaney, that you mentioned that when we don't have clarity of our goals and we don't have that immediate feedback of those goals, that's when we feel the anxiety, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, because it's like our brain is so quick to go into that state. It's just pre-programmed into being a human. So I think like if you've done that, because it's like the Google Maps example. If I can create Google Maps for my destination, I'm impervious to all those other stories that are going to come up in my head. But the stories will come up. So I better have my Google Maps. Helps me deter those thoughts.
Yeah. So just sitting of, hey, I know I don't want to do this, or I don't want to make the phone calls or do this thing, sitting with that for 5 minutes and going through that cycle of struggle or that portion of struggle and then allowing it to release, that's going to allow us to tap in a flow state. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it can be 5 minutes. It can also just be acknowledged. Like the minute it comes up, it's a practice, right? It's all about closing the loop, because the first time you do it, it might take 20 minutes. You might be anxious and distracted for 20 minutes until if I just start taking action, I'll get into flow. And then the next time it might be a 17-minute cycle, but eventually it'll be like a 30-second cycle where you have a half a thought. You're like, okay, I know that thought is dumb and it doesn't mean anything. I can just get into it.
And that's when you get to a point like that company, how they're like 500% more productive. And yeah, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how much time you have, but I know some people have questions here. Do you have a hard stop or hard deadline?
No, I'm good. I just want to respect your time, so I'm happy to do questions.
Cool. So if any of you have like a ride or need to go, I do get that. But if you have questions, now's your time to ask, because Delaney's here with us. So see, I know you had a question earlier. I don't know if you have the same one.
No, he answered it.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Do you mind if we take like, maybe like 60 seconds to like process through our notes and see if there's anything that we clarity on?
For sure. Do it.
Great.
I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back.
Perfect. I'll turn on some flow music.
Yeah.
just talk about it.
No, but I like.
You gotta
make you
think
reflect.
before you.
Peace.
See you, Darius.
Justin, Jacob. Bye, Darius.
Bye,
Darius.
bye, team.
Bye, legends. Bye.